Hi, and welcome to Ask a Pennsylvania Dutchman. My name is Chris LaRose, and this here is Doug Maidenford, our resident Pennsylvania Dutchman. How are you, Doug?
Well, pretty darn good, buddy.
Alrighty, well, you ready for our questions today?
Yes, I am.
We got a couple of good ones here. We've got one, well, actually it's a series of them from Seegal Galguntijak in Berlin, Germany.
Berlin, Germany!
We're going back to
the fatherland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright, so I'm going to have to break this up into some pieces.
Okay.
What do you think of your German heritage or about Germans in general?
Well, I can tell you folks now that this video isn't gonna be funny. It's gonna be informational. I think we enjoy making people laugh. I actually saw the questions ahead of time for this one, so I know what's coming. And this is a video that we're gonna try and clear up maybe some myths or answer some honest questions about cultural differences between us, the Pennsylvania Dutch, and Germans living in Germany. So, his first question was, what do we think of
your German heritage or about Germans in general, and do you feel yourself to be Germans as much as you are Americans?
Well, this is these questions are kind of personal. It depends on who you talk to, but I'm going to answer them from an overall perspective, let's say. Let's call it that. First off, us Pennsylvania Dutch are ethnically German, meaning our forefathers came from the area today in Germany in the 1700s, late 1600s, early 1800s. But you gotta remember, historically, Germany didn't exist back then. Germany was part of the Holy Roman Empire and all these other little kingdoms and dukedoms. There wasn't Germany like we know it today. So a lot of the people coming over weren't necessarily, they were German, they were coming from different states. They were coming from Hessen or the Palatinate or the Rhineland or from northern Switzerland as well and parts of eastern France. Not so much Austria, but that Rhine River Valley there in what is today Western Germany. So, and our forefathers came 300 years ago for some of us, 200 years ago. I think for most Pennsylvania Dutch today, that connection with Germany necessarily doesn't really exist. Because when they came over, there was no Germany, and when they came over here, we started, our culture and our language and all this stuff developed independently from Germany. And from the German language that is spoken there today. So I think most Pennsylvania Dutch, and I would say upper 90 percentile, would never say I'm German American. They're gonna say I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. It's distinct. Now, I think we all can acknowledge that our customs, a lot of our customs, our language, of course, the dialect, come from that area in Europe. And I think that, we have to acknowledge that, but, the two world wars really hurt that image of Germans here in America and the United States, so that during the two world wars, we really as a people distance ourselves from Germany as much as possible. A lot of people stopped talking the dialect because they were afraid, anti-German sentiments, etc. here in the United States.
Well, a lot of people had their farms burned.
Yeah, there were people that were attacked in the United States. A lot of people don't know that history, but it's true. Linguistically and culturally, we did try to distance ourselves during the 40s and so forth, and during World War I especially. But, we are ethnically Germanic, I guess we could say. But, most Pennsylvania Dutchmen would say, no, we're Pennsylvania Dutch. Well, Americans, we're Pennsylvania Dutch, maybe Pennsylvania Dutch Americans, we might say something like that.
Well, what about this language part? He says, also in your last video from Gathering, you were talking about not many people speaking the language anymore. Do you consider communicating with Germans over Skype, or just in order to speak Dutch? Do you even understand the normal German, or do you maybe just want to understand German? Well,
that's a good question there. First off, yeah, we know, and it's a fact that the number of people speaking Pennsylvania Dutch is constantly a low percentage of the Pennsylvania Dutch population. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that wasn't the case, but it is today. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Economics, there's no economic incentive for someone to speak Pennsylvania Dutch. There's no economic incentive for a parent to raise a child speaking a dialect that's only spoken by 200,000 people in the country.
And when a lot more people started going to college, they switched over to
and you
English.
had, up until 1900, till that turn of that century, we were a language and cultural island in the United States. There weren't a lot of non-Pennsylvania Dutch people living in Pennsylvania Dutch country, in Berks and Lancaster, Lebanon, Lehigh, etc. And, we were shut off in that sense. So our language and our culture was unfiltered. But post-1900, you had a lot more of non-Pennsylvania Dutch coming into that area geographically. And, yeah, things got watered down. You had people marrying outside. You had other cultures coming in. You had pressure from outside on our language. And like I said, the world wars really, really hurt in that instance. So, a lot of people refused to speak Pennsylvania Dutch around their kids because they didn't want them to know it. And that was a decision that those people made. I regret that. We can't go back and change history. But I will say that there is a growing interest in Pennsylvania Dutch language among younger people. And I'm really happy about that we have some 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds that are really interested in learning this language that their grandparents spoke and so forth.
Well, now, for the average Dutchman or Dutch woman, do they understand what they say here, the normal German?
Standard German.
Or high
No,
German?
most don't, because they had no exposure to it or experience with it. However, if you speak Pennsylvania Dutch, you can go to certain parts of present-day Germany, those areas where our forefathers came from, the upper Rhine River Valley, the present-day state of Rhineland-Pfalz, or the Rhineland-Palatinate, parts of Hessen. And if you talk to older people in those areas of Germany, in Pennsylvania Dutch, they're going to understand you because they still speak a dialect like that too, and they can speak with you. However, when someone from northern Germany or Bavaria or other parts of Germany speak German to a Pennsylvania Dutchman, they're going to have a really, really hard time understanding them. And if they speak Pennsylvania Dutch back to them, there might be some, they'll understand some, but they're not going to understand all of it because the dialect and accent is different. So I think it's easy for someone that grows up learning Pennsylvania Dutch to learn standard German because there are grammatical similarities and some vocabulary similarities, but there are differences too. It's easier to learn it, I think. But again, most people, that's another, most people in America don't learn German, they learn Spanish because the economics, it's the economics. It comes down to that a lot, I think.
Well, my dad was saying when he was growing up, he spoke PA Dutch, and they tried to force the kids to learn High German because they said that PA Dutch was a dumb farmer's language, and that High German
Some
was
kids got hit in schools. If they spoke Pennsylvania Dutch at recess or in the classroom, they were forbidden to do that. There are a lot of instances in American history where there were cultures that were suppressed. Not everyone always goes to the Native Americans, which that's a whole other story. And yeah, they were terribly suppressed and oppressed by the American government. But the Pennsylvania Dutch culture was suppressed too, and the language was suppressed too. And sometimes it was by our own choice, which is a really interesting topic to think about.
Yeah, let's see. He says here, also along the lines would be my question, not because I want to talk to you of Dutch over the internet, but because I'm interested in the answers and what you think about it. Besides the rich culture you inherited and have shown in your videos, of which, of course, also differs quite a bit from German culture, since they developed independently over the past few hundred years. So what are some of the really big things that differ between Pennsylvania Dutch culture and German culture that really kind of drive the nail home that they are rather different? Yes.
Well, we have a lot of what you would consider German stereotypes about our culture. We're hardworking, we're punctual people, we're plain to the point, we're direct, I think, much more than some other cultures. So we do have some of those ties to what you would consider stereotypical German stuff, but there are a lot of differences too. I think we have a much different sense of humor than the stereotypical German sense of humor is. Not saying the Germans aren't funny, but I think the Pennsylvania Dutch like to tell jokes and like to fool around and be stupid, act dumb. I don't really see that a lot in German, with typical German culture. I have lived in Germany. I can speak standard German. So I have experience over there, and that's a big difference. Not ethnically, food-wise, we have a lot of commonalities between German food and American and our Pennsylvania Dutch food. Linguistically, of course, we have the dialect that connects us. I think sense of humor is a big difference for us between them and us. And there is that we're proud people. I'm not saying the Germans aren't proud, but I think that's a whole cultural thing in Germany about showing national pride and so forth because of their history, of course. But I think here in the United States, the Pennsylvania Dutch are very proud Americans and not afraid to show it. And I think that's a big difference too, culturally. And it's funny, he said how the culture that we inherited. Yeah, we inherited a very rich culture, but I will also add that we, the younger generation and the people living today, are continually building and creating more culture and carrying on those traditions. So we inherit it, but we're not discarding it. We're keeping it too.
Yeah.
Those are great questions. I mean, it's a really interesting topic. A lot of Germans are interested in Pennsylvania Dutch because it's like this snapshot out of the 15 and 1600s. We have this language that developed that's German here in Pennsylvania in the 1700s, and it's still here. And I think for a lot of Germans, they see that as that's a really interesting topic, and that we have these cultural similarities too. That we're just transplanted Palatinates or transplanted Hessians. Well, we are, but with 300 years of change, evolution. Yeah, you could almost call it evolution. It's really interesting.
And are there any? We'll try to wrap this up with some linguistic differences.
Yeah.
Are there any very different words that Germans would use?
Well, I think the biggest thing and the biggest difference is the fact that he made that the German language developed and continued to develop in the 1800s and 1900s and up to today.
And Dutch just stayed the same.
And Dutch didn't. So especially with when new things were invented or technology, those words just don't exist in Pennsylvania Dutch because who's going to make them up? And because, for a language to work, if a new word is made up for something, it has to be accepted and used.
So like the word cell phone.
Or cell phone or computer. Now, there have been attempts at people making up Pennsylvania Dutch words for those things, and some of them are really good and creative. However, how do you get that message out for other people to start using that word? And that's why a lot of people look at Pennsylvania Dutch as kind of I've heard the term bastard language used because we do have a lot of English words when we speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Well, that's because a lot of those words are words that in Germany a new word was created and could be disseminated among a population and started getting used. But here in America, well, that wasn't the case,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a huge difference. And the fact that we were an island, and because of that, we were cut off from a lot of things in that sense.
Alrighty. So, just an attempt to make this video a little bit funny. Tell us a joke, Doug.
A joke?
A PA Dutch joke.
Really translated into English.
Yeah, something indicative of the kind of humor that Dutch folk.
Oh, that's easy. Well, this lady went to the doctor and she was going in for a normal checkup, and when the doctor was done doing everything, she goes, "Doctor, I have a question. It has nothing to do with me." And the doctor said, "Well, go ahead." And she says, "Well, my husband, we're having a little trouble in the bedroom." And the doctor said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, it don't make no more." And the doctor said, "Well, that's no problem. They make pills for these things today."
Mm-hmm.
And then she says, "Well, I know I've seen these commercials, but my husband he hates to take pills. He won't take pills. Now what am I going to do?" And the doctor said, "Listen to me. Does he drink coffee in the morning?" She says, "Yeah, he drinks 2-3 cups every morning." He goes, "All right," the doctor says, "I'm going to give you a prescription for these pills. You drop one pill in his coffee every day. He won't notice it. He'll slurp that down and boom." She says, "Okay, I'll give it a try. I'm at wit's end," she said. So a couple of weeks later, the lady was back at the doctor's office for another checkup. Everything went well, and then the doctor at the end of the checkup said, "Hey, tell me, did you do what I told you to with these pills and your husband?" And the lady said, "I did. I got the prescription filled. The very next morning, I snuck one of those pills into his coffee. He slams the coffee back, and right then and there, he gets up from the table, he takes me in his arms, He rips my dress up over my head. He throws me on the table, and we do it right there on the table. And the doctor said, "That's wonderful. Isn't that great? I'm so happy for you." And she goes, "Well, I don't know." "What do you mean? It sounds like it was perfect." She says, "Well, yeah, it was really great, but now we can't go back to Starbucks."
All right. Well, you heard it from the Dutchman. This is